Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Sri Sarma. I'm the Vice Dean for Graduate Education and Lifelong Learning in the Whiting School of Engineering. I'm also a professor in biomedical engineering, and I see some of my students here. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the Fall 2023 Ilene Busch-Vishniac Lecture. This lecture was established by a group of alumni and faculty who wanted to recognize Ilene Busch-Vishniac for her contributions to the Whiting School during her tenure as dean. The lecture provides the opportunity for an accomplished woman to come to campus and speak about her journey. Ilene Busch-Vishniac served as a faculty member at various institutions before coming here to Johns Hopkins in 1998, and she served as the first woman as the Whiting School Dean of Engineering. Unfortunately, she's been the only woman since then, but we were proud to have her. She remained at Johns Hopkins until joining McMaster University as provost in 2007. During her tenure here as dean, Dr. Busch-Vishniac helped attract more research funding and emphasized aggressive recruitment of student and faculty. Undergraduate engineering enrollment rose more than 20%, and the school almost doubled in number of research centers. She has served as a lead supervisor for 18 PhD students, 34 master's students, and a host of undergraduate students doing research in her laboratory. They engaged in research projects and had several teaching and research awards. I am honored that Dr. Busch-Vishniac is here today with us. Thank you for coming. She's right here in the front row. Thank you. So now I'm pleased to introduce our Fall 2023 Ilene Busch-Vishniac Lecturer, Ruchika Singhal. Ruchika Singhal is the president of Medtronic LABS, where she leads a passionate and entrepreneurial team across the United States, Africa, and Asia with the mission to expand access to healthcare for underserved patients, families, and communities worldwide. Through tech-powered and community-based health delivery, Medtronic LABS is transforming population health management for chronic conditions in low-income settings, with almost 1 million lives touched since the inception. Ruchika Singhal received her master's degree in biomedical engineering here at Johns Hopkins University in 2001, and a master's of business administration in finance, strategy, and international business from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business in 2010. Ruchika Singhal is actively involved in mentoring social businesses and is passionate about healthcare and women's empowerment, especially in underserved communities. We are thrilled to have her with us today to tell us about her life journey. Thank you. Ruchika, nice.
There you go. I think we got this on. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think, yeah, I do need the mic here. But no, seriously, thank you for being here. It is so good to be back. I got a little tour of the campus earlier, and this is a different campus than what I remembered. You guys are really lucky. I will say I've been having a little bit of envy for the past few hours, just watching all of the resources and all the cool stuff that you all are doing. It's like, I wish I were your age right now and have access to all of this, but you're in good hands. I will share a little bit about my journey. I cannot believe how many years it's been. I left here in 2001, and it's actually very nice to see somebody I worked with who I also haven't seen in 20 years here, but time goes by fast. But please do ask questions. This doesn't need to be just me talking at you. Seriously, please ask questions. It makes it more fun. So a little bit about myself. I am from India originally. I grew up there. I came to the US for undergrad and went to a small liberal arts school, not too far from here, Franklin and Marshall College. And I will say I was pretty clueless at the time. If some of you might know the term fresh off the boat, I was one of those people. Had never traveled outside India or anywhere by myself and landed in a liberal arts school. The only thing I knew was I did not want to go to medical school. Like that was the deal. I had gotten into medical school in India and I was petrified of that concept. So liberal arts college was where I ended up, and then very quickly realized that I do like biology and I do like science. So I got to figure that out. And that's how I ended up at Hopkins after that. And I'll tell you more, but the thread in all of this that I do want to share with you is that, life doesn't take the path that you might think for yourself. And especially in the times that we live in right now, I mean, just everything is changing and the pace of change is accelerating, if anything. So how do you navigate that? Like, you guys have such an incredible opportunity in front of you, which can be overwhelming, but it can also be really exciting. So I just want to share a little bit about kind of how I have been navigating that, and still continue to do so. I hope I have at least, Dean Eileen is here. I hope I've got another 30 some years to go. But it's like, what is that constant thread? Because your career pathways will change. Life will bring new challenges, new opportunities. The world in 10 years is going to look completely different. So how do you navigate that? The world I was in 25 years ago is not the same that we live in today. And I think for me, and I think we put this in the title somewhere too, the thread has really been kind of finding what your purpose is, like who you are, what is it that you're passionate about, and what is it that you're capable of. Not what you just studied in school or what people expect you to do, but really it's truly knowing yourself and figuring that out for yourself. And it also changes over a period of time. So as much as, my mom's desire for me was to be a gynecologist since the day I was born, women in our family don't work, still don't. And doctor was like the ultimate thing in the entire extended family. I think most of my aunts and uncles still think I'm some form of doctor because biomedical engineering, they do not understand. And I work enough with doctors and I'm in operating rooms and healthcare systems. They're like, she's a doctor of some sort. But it's like those aspirations and titles can actually be quite limiting. And in the world that we live in, like, that's the potential part of it. It's like, think about what are the things that excite you, and what are the things what you're capable of. You will find lots and lots of things that'll open up, like just new doors and opportunities. So for me, going back to my story a little bit, from F&M, I think it was my second year in undergrad where I was wandering around, didn't know what to do. And one of my professors in physics was like, you keep talking about you want to do something with biology and engineering. Have you looked at biomedical engineering? I'm like, what is that? And I literally looked up, I think, 50 programs in the US, and Hopkins was one. And I wrote letters to all of the faculty working on any cool projects. In those days, we wrote letters, which nobody does anymore. And I don't even know how I found out about who was doing what, because there was barely any information on the internet. But Dr. Takor was one of the professors who wrote back, and I ended up in his lab for the summer, and then ended up applying to the master's program and ended up there. And it wasn't, it was the possibility of something. You don't even know exactly what it's going to be, but sometimes you just have to take a chance. I don't think very many people went from a liberal arts college to a master's in BME at Hopkins, even in those days. And I mean, I didn't have an engineering degree. I had a biomedical physics degree. I was telling some folks earlier, because I was basically trying to meet all of the requirements that were needed to help me qualify to get into the master's program. And that's how I ended up at Hopkins. And really, even at Hopkins, I think I was telling a couple of you guys, somebody said something about like volunteering and doing all these cool activities. I'm like, we bought the aquarium for the IBT office and set up furniture. Like, that was my extracurricular activity at the time. But it's like, you find your own experiences and things that you're passionate about, where for us, for me at the time, I think I had some entrepreneurial gene in my body, but working on cool projects and just finding your own way, not just doing things because someone else said this is the cool thing to do, but just finding your passion. So did that. I think I had very much plans to stick with the entrepreneurial track, but there was one practical reality, which I'll also come back to. But being a foreign student, I did need a visa to stay in the US. And that's how I ended up at Medtronic, which was really, it's like, the big company that you don't go to when you work for a cool startup. It's the complete antithesis of what you would aspire to go to. But I realized, 20 plus years at Medtronic now later, that you can't take those things at face value, that, you find your opportunities and give it a chance. Don't be fooled by labels or perceptions, because you will find your own trajectory and you'll find your own path within that. Medtronic has actually been an amazing journey for me. I have not followed the normal path there either, because apparently I have problems with that. But so I started there in engineering as an engineer, and very quickly realized I'm pretty bad at it, just generally speaking. And wasn't my passion to sit and design things, but I realized what I learned from BME and what I was relatively good at was connecting the dots between what surgeons were asking for, what engineers could build, what marketing wanted to do, what we could get through with regulatory and clinical. And that turned out was a fairly unique skill. And it was one of those things that from the very beginning, I was the little kid that would go to all of these surgeon meetings. And when I started, I was fortunate. Luck does play a role in all of this. But I was very fortunate. I was in the neuroscience part of the business. And it was just the early years of early years of when Medtronic got approval for what is called deep brain stimulation. So some of you might be familiar with that, but you essentially put electrodes in the brain to treat conditions like essential tremor and Parkinson's. And it truly was like opening up Pandora's box, where we suddenly had the ability to put electrodes inside the brain, and everybody had an idea on where to stick electrodes in the brain and what to treat with that. So every neurologist, every neurosurgeon on the planet had an idea on a piece of napkin that they explained the brain anatomy to the little kid who had just started working at Medtronic, and whose job it was to take all of these ideas and actually translate it into some sort of roadmap and strategy. And I will tell you, it's like you don't appreciate these things until later, but you see the evolution, and like you figure out that nothing quite works the way you might think it would have. In those 5-7 years, I think we solved every problem that ever existed in the neurodegenerative disease space, at least on paper. None of them have panned out the way we would have thought, because turns out the brain is a lot more complicated than any of us would think. So, a healthy dose of skepticism about what's possible is also not a bad thing. And reality, and again, the tie-in to today's world is also, there's no shortage of hype around what's possible, but but we'll see how all of that plays out and what good that really brings to the world. But but those experiences matter, right? So going into it with the optimism and hope for what's possible, but also really thinking about that there's lots of possibilities. It's not like predetermined where things are going to go. So I did a few years of that, and really, I think, I used to joke at some point of time, my title in the company was strategic planning director, and I was fairly obsessive about creating career plans. Like, one of the things that does happen is especially when you get out of like a structured academic career, all of a sudden you don't know what to do, because up until now you've had goals, classes, the next degree and whatever it is you're doing, and then you end up in a job and you're like, okay, now what do I do? So you start tracking, like, what is my next promotion? What's the next step? And what's the career development path? And so I used to do all of that, and I realized none of that worked for me. And so much for strategic planning. But But what I was good at was really, I realized I like to problem solve. And I was one of those problem creators that was constantly asking the adjacent questions, could never do what I was told to do as my job. And that created problems, but it also created lots of new opportunities for me that, in all these years, well, pretty much since 2007, I haven't had a role in Medtronic that existed before it was specially created for me because I came up with some area that was interesting and everybody was like, yeah, that's important. Well, since you came up with it, can you figure out what it is? And it's a special assignment that ends up being a job, which is not a normal career development pathway in any organization. And at some point, you just get comfortable with that. It's risky, and it feels scary because you see people around you that are following the tested path and maybe on a schedule of promotions or however you measure success. But you realize that if it doesn't connect with what it is that makes you truly happy, and what actually motivates you and makes you get out of bed in the morning, you reach a point in life where you either plateau or you actually become very disillusioned with life. I will say I'm 45, and so many of my peers in sort of middle to upper middle management roles in various corporations are all walking around like zombies trying to figure out what to do next because they're stuck, and it's the titles and the financial sort of success becomes your measure, but you're not really happy with that. And I will say for everyone here, you guys are obviously smart enough, you'll do well in life, you don't have to worry about that, but think about what it is that you care about. And because we have the opportunity to actually live that life, to do what we care about and still be successful. Most people don't have that privilege. You're here, so you do, because you'll be fine. But really discovering that will help you be successful beyond your dreams in areas and ways that you can't even imagine. But live for that and aspire to that, because very few people get to that. I will say I've been one of those fortunate ones. At some point, this has become like my story, so to speak, in Medtronic. But about a decade ago, then CEO of Medtronic, he's from Bangladesh originally. He used to be the CEO of GE Healthcare, and when he came, he challenged the organization to come up with new ways to expand access to care. Our reaction, a lot of us in the company are like, we do deep brain stimulation, frontiers of medical technology. What do you mean low income anything? And it was one of my jobs was to put together, we go through this annual strategic planning process in the company where across the entire corporation, people will bring together like all the ideas for the next 3 years, 5 years. So you had to have a slide on that, and my job was for my business unit to put that together. So I had to put a slide in. And we came up with an idea around screening kids for ear infections, and it was inspired after a project I had heard about in India around cataracts for blindness. I put it in, and he really was like, this is great. Tell us more. And we're like, everything I know is on that one slide. I don't know anything else. It's like, yeah, no, let's look at this more. And then, I was pretty junior in the organization, but he really took an interest in the project and wanted like quarterly updates on things like that. And that is what led to creating Medtronic LABS, which is what I lead right now, which is a standalone organization funded primarily and supported by Medtronic, but focused on expanding access to care in low middle income countries. And I will tell you, that opportunity over these 10 years has transformed my learning, my career trajectory. I would have never thought I would be in global health. I have an entire team of people. We're doing work in digital health and global health. And a lot of people on my team even say, because I think even when I introduce myself, I'm like, oh, I am a med tech person. And my team is like, you're a global health person. And I'm like, nope, I refuse to be global health. I am never going to be a global health person. But, the truth of it is like, those are labels that we restrict ourselves as well. And we don't have to, over this period, I started out in neuroscience, strategy, international business, whole lot of things, emerging markets, and then got into this whole innovation thing and global health. And now digital health, I will say 4 years ago, I didn't know the difference between cloud and on-prem and software, like knew nothing about software development. And now we're developing digital systems for national, like for countries, for their healthcare systems. You can learn, is my point. And the world is changing really, really fast. So you have to learn. You have to keep that curiosity going, not just in school, but lifelong. But the why part of it is really important. And just coming back to that, because I will say, I had never thought that this whole work in the global health space would inspire so much passion for me. I love neuroscience, always have, and I always will. But, I'm from India originally, and going back, like you just see, you can invent all of these cool therapies and technologies. What's the point if half the people on the planet can't even get access to basic things that we invented 100 years ago? We can keep pushing the boundaries, but then who's working on making all of that accessible? And we were talking about that a little bit at lunch, and these aren't problems just in the developing world. These are problems everywhere. There are problems in our backyard. We just started a project in Camden, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. The life expectancy differences in adjacent zip codes can be anywhere like up to 20 years, just in between Philadelphia and Camden, or between Benton Harbor and Detroit, I think. But every part of the US has places like that, right? And I realized like everything I had done in my life was leading up to this, in where I'm from, all of the work I had done internationally, the ability to engage and connect with people from all different disciplines to solve a problem that matters at a scale that can truly make a difference in the world. So taking on a purpose like that, and finding that can take time. It's not something that you wake up one day and be like, oh, this is what I'm passionate about, this is my purpose, and this is what I'm going to do. But it's an evolution, and it requires a lot of discovery, self-awareness, reflection, engaging with a lot of different people, doing different things in different spheres, and making those choices for yourself. So that has really been a big part of it for me. I have a team of people that I'm just in awe of, because I think A, they're all younger than I am, and B, they are just so smart and brilliant and passionate and committed. And it's like I learn from them every day, and I'm inspired by them every day. And you also realize like, how much you can give to others, that it's not just the title, financial well-being, but really focusing on what are the things that matter to you, the purpose of the problem and the difference you're trying to make in the world, the people around you. That'll in the long run give you a lot more joy and satisfaction and lead you to be successful. And the other part of that I will also say is just mentors in my life have been huge. I feel like I've just been incredibly fortunate every step along the way, that there have just been people kind of holding my hand and encouraging me and guiding me. And you guys are just starting out, but look around you, your friends, your teachers, that's the starting point. And invest in those relationships, because they are crucial in life. Like that, those are the only things that'll carry you through. So I'll just say, in all parts of life are also connected. It's not just about career. So find your passions outside as well. And you won't realize how these things can sometimes be interconnected. And it'll help you discover different parts of you. That'll make you stronger in everything that you do. For me, a big thing has always been, well, I used to be a dancer when I was here. I don't dance as much anymore, but mountains has become one of my big things. I think for the longest time, growing up in India, like Himalayas were just amazing, and I always wanted to go. But I wanted to climb, and I didn't even have the courage to say that out loud, that I could do these types of things, because, you know, again, growing up very conservative, girls just don't do things like that, outdoor sports or like just anything. So I never did. And I think when I turned 40 was when I told myself, I'm like, if I'm going to be serious about this mountain climbing business, now would be the time to start, because this isn't going to get any easier. And I've been learning, like doing more ice climbing, rock climbing, skiing, all of those things. I live in Colorado, so it's a really fun place to do those things. But you realize, you know, so yes, so I'm still working on my goal around that. But you realize you build these images of yourself, not just by yourself, but by others around you. So don't let them hold you back. So for me, one of the biggest things, like I've had a coach for a few years, and I wasn't trying to climb Mount Everest, but I went to Camp 3, and I will say, you know, it's like the term, like you're a mountaineer or you're an athlete. Like I could never imagine that for myself. Like that was always everybody else. I was always dabbling in these things, and I realized like that, you know, it's like sometimes like you look at the pictures, you're like, wow, that's actually me, and I need to get over my own conceptions of myself that have been limiting me and what's possible. And it could be a sphere that you've never thought of for yourself, or you've just blocked that out. So I would just say, and that, you know, like don't do that, one. B, it applies to your professional aspirations as well. It's like, oh, I could never be that person who would, you know, speak at the UN, or whatever your goal is, that's someone else who does that. And I think women especially, we tend to limit ourselves with those types of things, on like self-created notions of who we should be or can be, but break through those. And I think it helps to have somebody to hold you accountable, and somebody who's different, that can challenge you and maybe sees you differently. So nurture those people in your life as well who can push you to do that. And yeah, I mean, you know, happy to answer questions, but I'll just say, really, like the more you can find that purpose for why you do certain things, the decisions that you make, and pursue it for the joy of it, life will turn out pretty good. And, you know, it's a very exciting time to be alive just in general. So yeah, maybe I will stop there if you guys have questions.
I can definitely relate to the conservative parents and how girls, women should behave. So great to see that you've sort of broken out of that, whatever you want to call that. Well, thank you so much. It was really nice to hear about your journey. I would like to open up the floor for any questions from the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Ruchika. Thanks so much for coming here and talking. I really relate to you so much on many different levels too. I'm also currently in the global health space, but my background's in mechanical engineering, so not super linear to coming to global health. I also relate to the feeling of being junior in an industry setting and not really knowing where you fit in, but that was what my question was around. So how did you like hold your own when you were maybe not part of like the majority party, being a woman of color and maybe being more junior in these settings?
Yeah, big hair for one. I stopped worrying about things like that. You know, honestly, own it. it's in your head more than anything else. You know, every room I was in, like whether you're around high profile physicians or senior people in a corporation or anything like that. I mean, now with my team, I'm not the youngest person, but I feel like I'm always the only woman and the youngest person in the room. And you're like, okay, well, I can sit there and worry about that or just be myself. And at some point, I think I started just appreciating and embracing that I'm okay being unique. I stand out. So then stand out and be on stage, and it's all right. You know what you're talking about. You're smart, you know, and that's, I feel like, has been the strength to lean into, that I know what I'm doing. And as long as I am solid in that, then what's there to worry about? You know, it doesn't matter, like there's a human being on the other side, and get over all of the titles. It takes practice, but whatever helps you be confident in those moments, find that for yourself. For me, I will say dance was actually a big parallel in my life right around that time, because I also never thought of myself as a dancer, and I was more scared of dancing than I was of anything at work. So I would always tell myself, I'm like, if I can perform on stage, this is a piece of cake. A presentation to a surgeon, no problem, because it was just a comparison thing. You know, you get comfortable with the butterflies in your stomach, and you know how to overcome those. But it's that, like, balance helps. I will say it's in your head more than it is anywhere else. And you have to get it over, and you have to find your own ways of coping with that. For me, it was I know what the butterflies feel like. I know I can stop, take a deep breath, and find my center, and then I'm good to go. And then know your stuff. That will always be your armor.
Thank you. Other questions? I actually have a question, if I could. Could I ask? So in your bio, there's like obviously this global health, access to healthcare, and women's empowerment. Could you give us some examples of maybe solutions that you at Medtronic LABS developed specifically for women's health? You talked about the ear infection. I was curious about that, but or other examples of what you've developed and the impact it's had.
Yeah, for sure. So, so this has been a journey for years in the making, but so what we are doing in Medtronic LABS right now is what we define as tech-enabled healthcare delivery at the last mile. So what that really means is in most parts of the world, there's just not enough doctors, there's not enough clinics, but there's armies of community health workers who are predominantly women in most of these communities, and they're typically sort of the more respected, often teachers or nurses or midwives, but like respected women in the community that are really responsible for providing just all sorts of health advice and taking care of the community. The workforce has not been formalized in most places, but in a lot of the countries, there's at least like a cadre of these community health workers that exist. So what we are doing is developing like digital applications for these health workers so that they can be a lot more knowledgeable about what they're treating and be a lot more efficient, because oftentimes these women are not paid. They have to walk from house to house. It's pretty tedious work, and people in the community rely on them. So how do you help them risk stratify which patients to go to, be able to detect symptoms, signs, especially for chronic conditions like hypertension, diabetes. It's not something you can take a pill and be cured. There's a lot of counseling. There's a lot of just guidelines that need to be adhered to, and detecting complications before they become worse. And it's very hard to provide all of that training in a classroom setting. So can tech augment some of that work? So that's the work that we're doing, working very closely with national health systems in the countries that we're operating in, primarily sub-Saharan Africa right now, a little bit. We just started in Bangladesh, and that's the work we're starting in the US as well, where the couple of community health workers are going door to door, like in a place like Camden, New Jersey, where there's a trust problem in the community as well, just because of the race dimension. So yeah, and so the thing about this is, obviously as we are evolving as a society, it's not just infectious diseases, but these chronic conditions are accounting for more and more of the disease burden. And unfortunately, it is impacting women a lot more. So, and women are the last in the family to take care for themselves. They'll take care of the family and the kids before themselves. So a lot of it is really about counseling them as well on the importance of just, and women are responsible for the food and like the life situation things. So yeah, so we work a lot with them. In the US, there are some organizations that are really pulling together a lot of what's called the social determinants of health. Sort of resources available for that, and then making sure there's linkage to that. Again, women end up being the care providers a lot in that case too, and just connecting those resources. So, yeah.
Nice. Great, thank you. You have another question? Yes?
Yeah. Hi, Ruchika. Great talk, by the way. So I have two questions. I recently joined a lab. So one of the first questions my professor asked me, do you want to do a PhD? So I heard that you realized that you weren't interested in engineering after you joined your job. So why didn't you do a PhD back then? And the second question was that I also read that you did an MBA. So what made you decide that you needed an MBA?
Yeah, so I think the PhD decision for me was, I knew I wanted to work and actually develop solutions and deploy them more than do academic research. Not that you cannot do that after a PhD program, a lot of people do, but I wasn't like that passionate about any topic to spend 5 years. How much was it in Dr. Takor's lab? I think it was like 8-year average to get a PhD in his lab, and that was pretty scary at the time. So yeah, master's degree was good. The MBA honestly was, it goes back to a little bit of what you think you should do and people tell you to do, and this sense of like missing out. Because I had studied liberal arts, I'd studied engineering, I had never actually learned all the economic terms and finance terms. So in a lot of the business meetings, you're sitting there like, well, I understand it, but everybody's using all these big words and I'm not sure, maybe I should go get an MBA. And then everybody has these MBAs and they all think they're the smartest people on the earth, so maybe I should get one too. But I loved my work enough that I was like, I'm not quitting my job to go do an MBA. So I did the weekend version at University of Chicago. And I realized that I had no desire to go do investment banking or consulting or any of those things that everybody's supposed to do, or even private equity or healthcare VCs. Like, those are the cool jobs coming out of business school. And I'm like, I'm good with my Medtronic job. I actually do real work. So it was, a lot of my friends used to laugh at me at business school too. They're like, you should at least look. I'm like, listening to all of you people talk about your jobs, I'm not excited about it. Like, I like what I do on a day-to-day basis. But it goes back to that a little bit, right? Like, you have to be true to what it is that you like. A lot of people there are people who love investment banking and finance, and that's okay. It's just not for me, and I didn't want to do it just because that's the cool thing to do. Like, I like hanging out with doctors and doing, pipeline technology development. Like, that's fun. So don't do it because it's a career choice. Do it for what you want to do with that.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, there's one here. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had some really influential mentors during your career. I was wondering, were those mentors people who supported you in this follow your dreams, or were they like, what was their perspective on that, and how did they help you? What was your interactions with them like? What was the most valuable?
Combination, I guess I would say. So, it's this, I don't know, have you heard of this concept of your personal board of directors? So you know how a company has a board of directors and they advise the CEO on strategic directions and make sure you're not doing anything wrong, basically. It's a little bit like that. You're the CEO of you incorporated, right? But you need to have a personal board of directors with who know you, but can also give you advice on different aspects of life at different stages of life, right? So, and you have to cultivate that over a period of time. I wasn't actively doing that early in my career, but at some point I realized I was doing it. And so there have been people, and you also have to change out your board of directors as you go through different stages of life. So, I mean, I had a combination of people, a lot of them at Medtronic, like senior leaders at Medtronic, but then also customers, physicians that I worked with and developed relationships with, and friends, you know, who also know a different side of you and can help keep you honest and ask you hard questions. So, you know, I mean, I have two people I'll talk about. One was my boss at Medtronic, who really first nurtured a lot of this work. He was the CFO of the business unit that I was in, and not that he knew anything about global health, but he also was very passionate. So he gave me a lot of cover to do the work that I needed to do in terms of the internal politics of the organization, and really just encouraged that. Like without that, would never have been able to do any of the work, you know? But then he was also, so there's him. And then the CEO, the former CEO of Medtronic, he, you know, I mean, now he's like, I mean, I've gotten to know him a lot more since he retired, and now he's much more actively involved with the work that we're doing. But from the beginning, he just like encouraged and was there. I actually left Medtronic at one point of time, and then I came back 2 years later to lead this, and it was him. He was like, you need to come back and lead this work. Like now we've set it up, the structure is all right. So it does help to have people like that who can also create opportunities for you. It's not just about mentors, but you need sponsors as well. And there's a difference between the two, right? You understand the difference between the two. But you do need people who will keep you honest. I mean, so the company I went to was another medical device company, and the CEO of that company is still a mentor for me. Like he's one of the people, he's like, I can't believe you left, but I can tell. It's like when I told him I was leaving, he's like, I can feel you smiling through the phone. You just sound so excited about it. And like, yeah, this is my passion. This is what I want to do. So yeah, people, and if they don't support you, then you also have to understand and be willing to kind of stand your ground a little bit.
Thank you. Other questions? Can I ask one more? Yes. It's okay. So I think this is true for both academia and industry, that when you look at leadership, right, in academia, whether it's a department chair or a dean, which I think in your time, Dr. Busch-Vishniac, I mean, it was rare to have a woman dean in engineering in the country, and also rare in industry to have CEOs, presidents, and things. So you mentioned mentorship, and they seem to be all he's. Just can you tell us a little bit about the obstacles, challenges that you faced that you feel were particularly because you were a woman, and how did you kind of address challenges? Because you did finally make it to the top. Any advice? I see a lot of young women engineers here. Any advice?
It's a whole talk in
Sharing
itself.
your experience, yeah.
I mean, you know, the reality of it is, as women and as minorities, that's just a daily, I mean, that never goes away. I think all of us, well, we all deal with it in different ways. I would say, I mean, it starts with every meeting room that you're in. I was telling somebody earlier, I always need a mic because I speak softly and I've never learned how to project my voice. Everybody keeps telling me I should take voice lessons, and I do not have time for that. But it's just like, you're soft spoken. I'm not going to be the loudest person, or, people will talk over me. People will say the things that I'm trying to say and get credit for it. Like all of those things that you read and hear about, they're all true. I think the the best advice I can give you is really find your own unique strength and stick to it. Don't let that dissuade you, or just like dishearten you, but find your voice, find a way to make a contribution, and it will get noticed. You'll find the right people eventually. The world is not fair. It's never going to be fair, but you have to find your way to fight back, and you have to find your own way around those things. I mean, corporate management things, I think every story you can think of, I think has happened to me over all these years, but I've also had people willing to support me. It does help to have allies. I will say connect with others. You will find allies in the workplace. And the nice thing, it has changed. In 20 years, I will say it is getting better, certain industries more so than others. Don't be afraid to speak up. I mean, there are nice ways to do it, not necessarily confrontational always, but finding a way. I mean, I still deal with that, honestly, more in the countries I go to, because in other parts of the world, it's even worse sometimes. And you find a way, I think for me, a big part of it was also just owning who you are, like not letting the world shrink you in some ways, but standing up. I mean, I wear heels. I stopped wearing black suits a long time ago because I'm like, I don't feel good in those, and then I feel small. So I wear what I feel like wearing, even in corporate settings, when I want to stand out one way or another. So just like whatever helps you feel confident in the space, and build connections, talk to people, and find your allies. But I don't know if I've
thing if you can address, which is the balance, right? If you want to have a family or you want other, things in your life, how do you make the right choices? You talked about, going with your passion, but sometimes you might have 5 different things you're passionate about. So a little bit about balance and how to navigate.
Life is a buffet. You can't have all of it at the same time. So I will say, so I made this, I don't have kids, and that was a very conscious choice. My partner has a daughter, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to travel. Like, there was never a point in my life where I've been doing international work for 16, 17 years at this point, and I never wanted to stop doing that. So it was a very clear choice. I will say, my general rule for myself has been I can do 2.5 things well at any given point of time. So pick what those are. Career, and it's not even career, honestly, it's the work. I would do the work if I wasn't getting paid, but I've loved the work. And if I didn't find the work that I loved, then maybe I would have thought about something else. And then it has been either dance or mountains, which is a pretty big commitment. And then, the half is relationships and family. But it's just balancing those is about all I can manage. So I think we try to spread ourselves too thin because there are so many things to do, but choosing what you're going to be good at a given point of time, I think helps, because it helps to have clear priorities in your head then. And that's like, if my kids are a certain age, then that's what's important right now. I'm not going to try and go learn how to sing or write a book, because I'm going to do, whatever 2.5 things is kind of how I think about it, like my 2.5, and make sure I can juggle those. So, yeah.
Was recently, another thing I heard was not just what you're passionate about, but where you're most effective.
Yeah.
Go in that direction. And for me, that gave me a lot of clarity
Mm-hmm.
as to what I want to, how to navigate. Any other questions? for Ruchika? No, we're good. Well, thank you so much, Ruchika Singhal, for
Thank you.
sharing your personal journey. Thank you, Dr. Ilene Busch-Vishniac, for coming and supporting this series. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And then before we close, I just wanted to let you know, we do have time to sort of, network. You can meet the speaker, you can meet the former dean. We have receptions outside, so please just enjoy yourself and make the most of the day. Thank you.